Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live developer Q&A. Today, we're going to be talking about professions. My name is Josh Allen, aka Community Manager Lore, and joining me here today, none other than Senior Game Designer Paul Kubit. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Could talk some professions. It's exciting. It's exciting.
I'm excited too.
So, before we get into the questions here today, why don't you take a second to sort of introduce yourself, explain what it is that you do on the WoW development team, and why you are so closely related to professions.
Sure. Yeah. My name's Paul. I work on the World of Warcraft team. I've been on the WoW team for about six and a half years. And before that, I've been at Blizzard for about 10. I started in QA and kind of worked my way into working on WoW. Before professions, I worked as a quest designer, kind of started at Cataclysm and then worked my way through Pandaria and Legion and Draenor, and for Legion I just started working on professions. So I'm the kind of point person for all the professions content we put in the game for this expansion.
Nice. Okay, so definitely got a lot of questions to get through. Let's go ahead and dive right in. First question is not terribly surprising, the subject matter on this first question.
Yeah.
It comes from Galatia. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. I'm just going to put it on the screen. It says, Blood of Sargeras, what use is it to double gatherers? And why not make it BOA so it can be traded from gatherer characters?
Great. Yes. So we've seen lots of questions and feedback on Blood of Sargeras and the way it is in beta right now. And we're reading all of it. So please continue sending feedback. Honestly, this is really helpful to us. I'm going to answer a bunch of questions about Blood of Sargeras. I promise, Galatea CYC, I will get to yours as well. But first, I kind of want to set the stage for what Blood of Sargeras is supposed to be, and what it's how it's performing right now, and what kind of changes we have planned to make sure we're addressing everybody's feedback. Blood of Sargeras is supposed to be a measure of how much you're playing the game. Really, it's not supposed to be a gatherer-specific crafting item. It's not supposed to be only gatherers get this and everyone else has to struggle to get it. And there's a misconception that that's how it's supposed to be. And that's kind of how it is or has been on the beta for a little while. And the reason why is for a couple reasons. First is just the nature of beta. Things get implemented at different stages. In this case, the sourcing for Blood of Sargeras was put on mining nodes and herb nodes, skinning corpses much earlier than it was put anywhere else. So gatherers got a lot more of it. That was not the intent. We're not trying to push a you have to have a gatherer agenda or anything like that.
So just like the way that the implementation process went, it just the drops were put there before they were put somewhere else. Not that was the goal for it to only ever be there.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. And the second side of that is we probably didn't communicate that as well as we could. So that's on us. We can try and do better about that in the future. But yeah, so anyhow, that's kind of the intent of the item, and we're making some changes to fix that. That being said, there is a problem kind of with Blood of Sargeras right now. There's actually two problems. One of them is for people who have a lot of it, for people who don't have a lot of it and want to get more. You kind of recognize that right now with the double crafter people who have two crafting professions. Maybe they have for a long time and they don't want to change them, or they just would prefer to play that way and they can't get enough. So like I said, we're making changes. Some of those you'll see in beta already to make sure that there are more sources. We've moved around world quests so that crafters will see more crafter-specific world quests where someone in the Court of Ferondus wants you to bring him a leather hat, and you bring him a leather hat, and then you get a reward from that. We've also adjusted the reward so that those will be more likely to give you Blood of Sargeras and will give you more. And on the flip side, we've kind of removed some of the Blood of Sargeras rewards from the Gathering world quests. We've added them to dungeon bosses, so dungeon runs, you'll see them in there. There is the shoulder enchant for the boon of the Bloodseeker, which comes from the Wardens. That was originally implemented as kind of a prestige enchant at Exalted. In a future patch, you'll see that moving down to Revered, so that should be easier to get. And what that does is it makes it so just when you're out in the world doing quests and raids and dungeons and wherever, killing creatures, every once in a while you'll just see a creature has a bunch of Blood of Sargeras on him, and you'll have more that way. We've also done some tuning on the crafting side, because what we saw is that people who made armor, so that's the blacksmiths, the tailors, leather workers, needed a lot of blood. Basically, they needed Blood of Sargeras to craft pretty much everything at the end game that they made, whereas some others like alchemy and enchanting didn't really need any. So we made some changes. We added some cost to the alchemy side, and we removed some cost from a couple slots in the on the armor side. So that should be balanced a little bit more. And so hopefully those changes should help fix the I don't have enough blood to do the things I want to do problem. The second problem is I have a lot of blood of Sargeras, and I have nothing to use it on, and that one's a little bit trickier. We have a couple fixes in the pipe, some of which I can talk about, some of which we're still kind of deciding on. First is with the application of Obliterum. So for those of you who don't know, Obliterum is an item which you can get at max level, which you can use to increase the power level of your crafted gear. So you buy some new mail shoulders, you put them on, they start at eye level 815. You get some Obliterum, apply that, and then they become 820. And then you do it again to 825, 830, all the way up to 850. The production and application of Obliterum has a Blood of Sargeras cost to it, and that has been adjusted to be a little bit higher, so there should be a better dump for people who have a lot of Blood of Sargeras and don't know what to do with it. But I don't think that's quite enough. I think we need to do a little bit more. So we'll be talking more about that in the future, kind of what our plans end up being for that as we come up with them. And we have a couple ideas, just kind of deciding on what affects the economy of the game the best. We've also seen a lot of suggestions, like yours, Galatea Psych. The first one I'll address, which is not just BOA, but just unbinding the item. Right? It seems like kind of a magic bullet solution of, well, this character on my account has a lot of Blood of Sargeras, and this one really wants it and doesn't have any. And if we unbound it, then I could just trade them, and then both people's problems are solved in one fell swoop. And there's reasons we can't unbind it. First, it actually has to do with that Obliterum process I was talking about. Blood of Sargeras, like I said, the intent of the item is to be a measure of how much you're playing the game. And we use that as a protection in a world where crafted gear, as it always has been, can be sold and purchased on the auction house. And we want to make sure that we don't have a world where people can buy a full set of endgame raid gear with just gold, especially in a world where you can use real money to purchase gold. We don't want you to be able to buy power that easily. So the changes
through the WoW token.
Exactly, correct. Yes, thank you. So so the way that Obliterum works, it has that Blood of Sargeras cost, like I mentioned. Even if someone has a lot of gold, they got it, working on the auction house or however, and they want to buy a full set of armor. Well, they can do that now. In Legion, we've removed the restriction in Draenor that we have now where you can only equip 3 crafted items. There were some problems with that. People would buy 4 or 5 items not knowing that they couldn't equip them all and then be frustrated when they couldn't put on their 4th item. So we've removed that restriction of how many pieces of gear you can wear.
Nice.
But now people can buy a full set of gear. They can buy a lot of Obliterum to upgrade their gear, but they at least have to play the game to go get that Blood of Sargeras to apply it to their gear, and it's a protection against just making sure you can't 100% go and buy power. So that's why we can't unbind it. Now, your question about bind on account, well, that doesn't really violate that principle, right? We want to make sure you're playing, and well, why can't I just play on this character and then use that Blood of Sargeras to move it over to this other character?
Right.
That's correct. That doesn't really violate that principle, but there's still reasons why we can't make it bind on account, and it really kind of comes down to a philosophical idea, and I'll try to explain this as clearly as I can because it's very easy for me to kind of say this in a way which I might not do clearly. But it is, we don't want you to have a full array, a full stable of alts in order to play the game as effectively as possible. Now, that doesn't mean we don't like alts. We love people having alts. We if you like playing alts, you should play alts and you should have fun, and we like you to have fun doing it. And it doesn't mean we don't like profession alts either. We don't mind that you have someone who does mining for you and sends it to your blacksmith or to your jewel crafter or your engineer to use that material. That's the way the game's always been built, and we love that some people can choose to be double gatherer. I'm a druid or a demon hunter or some other class with high mobility, and I can kind of get from one node to another much more effectively that way. Or I'm a double crafter because I enjoy being able to make more items and have a little bit more control over kind of how I affect my own economy and the game's economy. So. Sorry, I forgot the where I was getting with this.
Well, you were kind of talking about, like, it was sort of an issue that we had with the farm in Mists of Pandaria,
right?
As
yes,
well
bind
as to
on
some
account.
degree the garrison, where you end up with, okay, if I want to be a hardcore mythic raider, for example, I should have 5 garrisons going all at once so that I can just get a whole ton of Savage Bloods or whatever.
Correct.
So.
Yes. So we don't want you to have that full array of characters. And the way that we kind of release Blood of Sargeras in the game, or the way that you get it as a character, is very similar to the way that you get other bound items like order resources or artifact power. It's really, there's opportunities that are single-time, one-time opportunities, ends of zones, big quest lines, and Suramar and things like that, where you can get a lot of Blood of Sargeras. And then there's kind of time-gated content like world quests or lockouts and dungeons and raids, where you can kind of get a bunch every once in a while. And then there's the less efficient but more repeatable method of kind of just going to dungeons or going and using gathering nodes or the Boon of the Blood Hunter enchant. To be most effective, if Blood of Sargeras was unbound or bound on account, the most effective way would be to have a full array of characters, have them all do that one-time event, them all do those time-gated events. A world quest comes up that rewards 5 Blood of Sargeras. Well, if you have 12 characters, that's 60 Blood of Sargeras that you can all give to your main, and then that is de facto the way to be most effective and to get most strong, the most fast in World of Warcraft. And we don't think that should be the way that people are pushed. So I know for a lot of you out there, that's a disappointment, because you might be thinking, I would never do that. I only have 2 characters. One's a gatherer, one's a crafter, and I just want to give it from him to him. We see the problem. We recognize it. We're just trying to solve it on the other side. So again, keep giving your feedback. We're going to keep making changes. Let us know how it feels. If it ends up feeling great, if it ends up feeling good enough, hopefully it ends up in a place where it's very good enough.
Awesome. Taking a look at, so we have another couple of Blood of Sargeras related questions here. We'll go ahead and bring, I feel like a lot of this you've probably already covered a little bit, but we can bring it up anyway.
Sure.
Priesty Brit asked, why are dual crafters at a disadvantage getting Blood of Sargeras versus gatherer crafters?
Right. So I think I addressed that a little bit, but yeah, just to kind of reiterate, we don't think that you should have to have a gatherer. Gatherers should have a bit of a bonus, and that was kind of how that was initially contrived. The gatherers can get Blood of Sargeras. Oh, you're a gatherer. You're specifically spec'd into getting stuff. So maybe you have a little bit of an extra chance to get more Blood of Sargeras than other people can. So I guess, yes, that maybe is a disadvantage, but really it's that you don't have the advantage that gatherers have.
Right, and it's a little bit of a trade-off there. Like I can get more bloods to craft a smaller pool of items versus I can get, from the sounds of things, the intent is for it to be slightly less bloods.
Correct.
But
yeah,
you have a lot more that you can actually do with it as a double crafter.
I think that's fine. Slightly less should be okay. I think Ian mentioned it last week, or if he didn't, it's okay to have a little bit of gatherer envy, right? Because you can make all the cool armor and the gems and the enchants and whatnot. And so yeah, it's okay to be a little bit envious of the gatherers who can just get materials a little bit easier than you can.
Cool. Next question. More Blood of Sargeras asks, will there be any way to dump Blood of Sargeras, say at a trade-in vendor, if you have double gathering professions? So again, you kind of talked a little bit before about trying to find ways for people to use that. But what about the suggestion of like a trade-in vendor, like the Spirit of Harmony vendors from Myths or something like that? Yeah,
I think that's a great suggestion. That might end up being the direction we go. It's thank you, Reneth, for the suggestion. It was it's something we're talking about. There's a couple other ways we can do it too. I don't want to commit to anything yet, just because we're kind of looking at it. Touches a lot of systems depending on what we reward for what you can trade in with Blood of Sargeras. But I think that's a good question.
Great. All right, moving on. Next question. This one comes from Val Naressa on Twitter, who asked, you guys talk a lot about class identity and fantasy, but what is being done in Legion to do the same for professions?
A lot. So I can talk a little bit about this. One of the big goals going into professions, at the beginning when we were deciding what do we want to do this time, how are we going to make it interesting or different or the same, was we saw that there was opportunity to bring a lot more flavor into professions, to have those quest lines where instead of just kind of learning how to craft a cool piece of breastplate at a vendor, you actually go to the top of High Mountain and you meet some High Mountain Tauren up there, and you talk to one of them and they say, my grandfather's blacksmithing hammer was lost in this dungeon and I need you to go find it, and then when you bring it back, then I'll teach you his ancient long lost recipe of how to make a breastplate, and you should feel like a blacksmith when you're doing that. We should also have quests where a couple of professions have this, where you actually we break out the in World of Warcraft, honestly, like making a piece of armor is ding 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 item, right?
Yeah.
And yes, a little bit of that is for convenience, but also when you're learning how to make some of these recipes, you'll see quest lines where you're like, no, you actually have to go like fire the ingots and then press them out and then cool it in the quenching trough, and you should feel more like a that particular profession, and that's extended to all of them. I'm using blacksmithing as an example, but I mean, tailors are working with the local Nightfallen tailors that exist there in Suramar. There's jewel crafters working with the Drogbar, who are kind of these masters of working with jewels and gems, but it's a lot more rough and kind of primal style of jewel crafting. And so a lot of effort was made to kind of make your professions feel like you're hopefully fulfilling your profession's fantasy.
Cool. And so that's even like a little bit of a callback to like I remember back in Burning Crusade as a tailor, I had to go to a moon well to make moon cloth and stuff like that. So that's really, really cool.
Cool.
Next question comes from Coffray, asking about engineering. Says, is there a chance of engineering being given a mount to craft? Engineers really have nothing to sell from what I've seen thus far. Even the goggles we craft can only be worn by other engineers. It's extremely inconvenient. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there is a lot that engineers can still craft, maybe even from previous expansions, that's still useful. But how do you feel about stuff for them to craft in Legion?
Yes, this is a really good question. Thank you. So there are some things, first of all, that engineers can craft. There may have been a bug with it earlier, so it may not have been learnable or obtainable, but the failure detection pylon is one kind of consumable I'm curious to see if people start using more, which is it's a device you can put out, and then if it looks like you're about to, you would ideally use it when you're about to pull a raid boss or something like that. Sometime you think that failure might be imminent. You pull the raid boss. If it looks like you're going to wipe, then your goal, instead of becoming like, well, just die as quickly as possible, becomes die over there next to the pylon, because when the encounter ends, then it will res everybody who is standing near it. In fact, I think
That's
it
cool.
has some detection to tell, like, if your raid's really doing badly, it'll start wah, 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 it's glowing, so you can see like,
awesome.
okay, I should get over there. So there's a couple things like that. They are all engineering in mind. Not a lot of them are player power. Some roughly, like, that is arguably player power, or at least efficiency.
Very convenient, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of toyish type utility items like gun shoes, which you can use to move really fast and move over water if you want to. And a lot of effort in engineering was put towards things that are just for the engineer. I think that's historically a place where engineers have done better than other people. Of like, they can make cool things for themselves that no one else can use. So they have the robot that they can build, who's named Reeves. He's like a Fel Reaver, kind of like Jeeves, so he's
right.
Reeves.
Nice.
And you can use him as a lot of those consumables. So you can apply a module to him, and he becomes a failure detection generator,
cool.
pylon, or a number of other things. So that's kind of the idea for engineering. There is a chance in the future. There is a chance in the future for them to be given a mount to craft. If there's a cool opportunity to do so, engineers make probably the coolest mounts. So I wouldn't be surprised.
It's definitely true that Sky Golem is still very desirable. Even got like 3 years on now at this point.
Yep.
Okay, next question comes from Aldaldus, who asked, any chance some of the retired profession patterns from things like Nax 40, Zilgrub, Dire Maul, etc. will make their way to the black market auction house?
I think there's absolutely a chance. We always are looking at interesting things to put on the black market auction house. I think that the things that you will see show up on the black market auction house are more things that are iconic to their time. So yes, maybe if it's a really cool end game raid pattern for a breastplate, which you can't get an appearance for anymore, particularly things that you can't get appearances for anymore, then yeah, black market auction houses is maybe a good place for those to show up. If it's just a level 43 male pair of bracers that just for whatever reason the quest that rewarded it was removed at some point in the game, and then probably not, especially if that doesn't have a unique appearance to it. We do have in the professions tab a learned and an unlearned tab, and things which are no longer available will not be shown in the unlearned tab. So you won't feel like, if you're the master leather worker who's trying to learn every pattern, you won't see that one unlearnable thing in your list of like, you never earned this because you missed your chance 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So that should help dull that pain. But I hope that answers your question.
Cool. Next question comes from, this is actually a very similar question, comes from Trivia Cow, who asked, can the recipe restoration books work for pre-Legion recipes? We're being forced to drop professions, with rare recipes we've had since vanilla to pick up gathering. So to the second part of this question, you kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. The intention with the Blood of Sargeras is not to force people to drop professions they've had forever to pick up Gathering. So hopefully, once those changes once all those changes, I should say, make it into beta, you will feel less forced to actually do that. But recipe restoration books and working on pre-Legion recipes, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, as a crafter, especially in Legion, well, almost exclusively in Legion, there are a number of quests which reward recipes. Whereas in the past, you would go to a vendor or go to a trainer to learn your recipes, something that was relearnable, or you would drop off a creature in the world, a dungeon boss or something like that. These quests are not recompletable. Once the quests are completed on your character, they're complete, and they're not cleared when you unlearn your profession. So there's an issue that comes up where I decide I want to be a tailor. I play through the Legion quest line. I learn the 18 recipes that I learned from that. Then I unlearn tailoring to become a jewel crafter and decide no, tailoring is actually for me. There was no way for players to get those recipes back. So the books are a solution to that. They will make sure that whatever quests you've completed, the recipes that you were taught from those, you will relearn again. For pre-Legion recipes, things that were removed from the game, probably not. We probably won't put those on those recipe restoration books. They're really just to fulfill that specific functional function. But if that, like in the previous question, if there's something that is really cool and really desirable, and we want to be able to have players earn it again, and we don't think it dilutes the cool trophy factor of the people who did earn it during the time that they did earn it, because that is a factor too. Then we'll look to other methods like the black market auction house, or there's a whole bunch of systems. Dark Moon Fair has been good for giving out interesting looks of things in the past, and so on.
Cool. So yeah, just to kind of reiterate what the recipe restoration books, those are focused on. These are these recipes that you literally cannot get back. You can't go find them again because they came from a quest in Legion. They're not really intended as this is how you get back all of your recipes, and you shouldn't be using them to just switch professions constantly.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And if you do switch professions constantly because you're undecided, you at least won't have a permanently broken character. That's right. Yeah.
Cool. Next question comes from Tidios, who asked, will we see the return of profession buffs, such as extra sockets, enchants, bigger gems, and so on? So sort of calling back to like the Cataclysm, Mists of Pandaria-ish model of crafters just got better stuff.
Yes. So kind of. We have some... Not every profession has them. And they're never really anything which is going to just improve the raw throughput of your character as a tank or healer or damage dealer. But there are some things that you just get as perks for being that profession. I mentioned engineering earlier has about 50 of them. There's just a bunch of things you can have or do as an engineer that other people can't. You can use these cool gadgets that let you fly up in the air or at least make them more cheaply. Some other professions like leatherworking has a couple of them. They can make barding for their mount in Legion, which is gives you that benefit that you may have had from your stables in the garrison, which is you just, while riding your mount, you can't be dazed. So it's really useful if you're going to be planning on using your mount to run through a bunch of dangerous enemies.
That's awesome.
It's a 1 hour buff. Unless you're a leather worker, it actually becomes a 4 hour buff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so there's a number of things like that. It's not the biggest thing in the world. It's not plus 75 crit rating or anything that you just flat get for being a skinner. But it is going to be something that allows you to have something that other people don't have for making the profession choices that you did.
That's awesome. I love that there's all of these little like almost like toys that you get from professions in Legion, like stuff like you were talking about the failure detection pylon earlier,
right?
Or now this the mount barding. Like it's actually really cool that there's little things that just slightly influence your gameplay, not like dramatically, and it's not like, oh, you didn't bring your mount barding to the raid, that's it, you're booted, get out of the group,
right?
But it's still really cool, and I love stuff like that.
And to say something that we may not have answered as well as we could. The reason we don't do those profession buffs is exactly like you said. We don't want people feeling like they have to have a particular buff because your class is tuned in a way where a crit is better for you than mastery, or that by de facto leatherworking is better for you than tailoring. If you think that you want to be a double gatherer, or if you think your hunter fantasy wise is more of a leather worker than a tailor, then you should be making that choice for that reason, and we don't want to push you in another direction.
Yeah, like you should be playing a profession because you want to be playing that profession, and because you want to craft its items, or you want to gather things, and you want it for the gameplay of the profession, not because you think it's going to give you another 0.1% DPS in a raid or something like that.
Correct.
Cool. Next question.
Or even 0.2.
Or even 0.2.
Yes.
Yeah. Next question. I'm really excited about this question because I really like it. A question from Unariel, who asks, will professions be able to create transmog sets? It would be cool to have leather workers craft a warden transmogrifiable set for everyone to enjoy. Leather workers crafting a Worgen set. That's actually kind of a terrifying thought. But Warden transmogrifiable set. How do you feel about professions being able to create transmog sets?
There was a time in Lich King where some Worgens were skinnable, and we undid that. Thank you. Thankfully, we were kind of feeling out the Worgen fantasy.
Yeah.
Warden, I think, is a cool idea. So, yes, almost definitely at some point. We're not doing it in 7.0 just because I think that you'll have plenty of opportunities to get new transmogs. When 7.0 comes out, this is where the system is being introduced. So you have all the old quests and dungeons and raids and the new content to unlock all the looks that you want to have for your character. And additional profession ones would have less of a value right now, as opposed to at some point in the future. So not for 7.0, maybe not even for 7.1, but there will come a time where we'll see that we want to have some more cool looks. Maybe Warden I actually think that's a really cool one. So if you see that, people remember to thank you, Nariel, for that idea.
Awesome. Next question comes from Galdred. Very, very broad question here. He's asking, what is the long-term vision for professions in the eyes of the developers? As someone not in beta, I can't tell if crafted gear is supposed to supplement world, raid, or dungeon gear, or be its own progression, or something else entirely. So, long-term vision for professions. What are your thoughts?
Right. So there's a couple questions here. I want to actually answer the second part first, which is less long-term and more just like, how does it fit in the gear hierarchy? It's not all that different than it has been in past expansions. You will be able to, as I said earlier, make level 815 gear at the beginning, which is pretty good. And then you'll actually, via Obliterum, be able to increase that to item level 850, which is really good. Actually, probably some of the best you can get in the game, especially for the first couple weeks before we unlock the mythic dungeons and the raids and anything like that. That's pretty much equivalent to a normal Nightmare raid. So that will be very desirable, at least at that point in the game, for people who want to be on the cutting edge and have the best gear. Then you might see some of them pursuing crafted gear. Later on in the expansion, that becomes less true because those cutting edge players are going to be moving past normal Nightmare raid into heroic and mythic difficulties, and they'll also be getting higher item levels from mythic dungeons and the boosted mythic dungeons and whatnot. And so it won't be for them as much anymore. But then later on, as materials become more common, it becomes more affordable, and that actually does, for some people who may not play anything higher than LFR or even just kind of world quests here and there, 850 is very desirable, so it'll be good gear for them. So that's kind of where we see it fitting into the itemization scheme. As far as long-term vision for professions, not sure yet. We kind of reassess this every expansion, so we haven't really sat down and said, well, what is the 8.0 professions going to look like? We have some ideas, but a lot of times that's really informed by what the content is of that expansion. So this time you saw the Obliterum Forge, for example, is one of the features, and that's really just because Legion expansion equals demons, and you have this big cool demon forge which takes takes gear that you made with demonic reagents like Felwart and Demon Steel and things like that, and coalesces it into this kind of demonic energy which you rub on your shoulders. So whatever 8.0 ends up being will probably inform how professions look, at least in some way.
And you can sort of see over the history of World of Warcraft, like the way that professions have sort of evolved from expansion to expansion, like different things like Mists of Pandaria, for example, had the catch-up mechanics for cooking, and then so that I would imagine sort of influenced how in like Warlords of Draenor it was kind of like, well, you can kind of craft everything. As soon as you can be a level 1 tailor and start doing the warlords patterns at that point, and working your way up from there. And there's actually a lot of similar stuff like that, sort of expanding on that in Legion as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That system from warlords where you're pretty much able to make almost everything at skill level 1 we kept, just because Yes, most people will choose to kind of keep their professions for the life of their character, but you shouldn't feel like you have to. There was kind of a big annoyance tax in changing professions, just because you'd have to, all right, I want to be a jewel crafter now. Well, I need to go back and mine mithril so I can prospect mithril to get the things, just to be able to level up to that.
Right. Yeah.
It feels better if you can play the end game content. Now, there are still, for every profession, or almost every profession, at least is one thing that you have to be skill level 800 to make, but that's usually a prestige thing, like a mount or a really, really cool toy or pet or something like that.
Cool. Next question comes from Ranthe, who asked, will professions keep up with the raid tiers in terms of the items they can produce or upgrades to items they provide? So this is kind of along a similar vein to what we were just talking about, but specifically professions tying in with raid tiers, as obviously more raids come out in the expansion, item levels increase there. Are professions going to be keeping up with that?
No, they're after a while they're just going to be horrible. No, actually, that's not true. We do want them to be able to compete. So we have ways to be able to do that. The Obliterum Forge, I know I've mentioned it about 50 times, but provides a method to be able to do that. To just say right now it can increase item levels up to 850. Maybe in the future it's 860. Maybe even a higher number than 860, if you can imagine a number that high.
It is crazy.
So yes, I think almost definitely yes, there will be ways to make sure that professions still remain viable and interesting beyond the just 7.0 cycle.
Nice. Next question for Feralis. This actually is very similar to something we were just talking about a minute ago. Asked, are there any catch-up mechanics being looked at for fishing and archaeology, similar to cooking in Mists of Pandaria? So obviously we were talking about like your primary professions and the ways that there's sort of like that ability to craft kind of whatever at any point, but catch-up mechanics for fishing and archaeology specifically.
No, not really. We don't have it planned, and again, it's because we're following that Draenor model of you can fish at any Draenor pool or at any Legion pool starting at level 1. You can archaeologize. Right. You can survey, I guess, at any
I like
dig
archaeologize.
Site. Yeah, you could do either, really. Starting at skill level 1. So there is there wasn't really need for catch up mechanics.
There's nothing really to catch up to,
right?
Per se.
Yes, exactly. So for those professions in particular, there's not a whole lot you unlock at 800.
Cool. Next question from Arwo, who asked, can crafted relics be turned into Obliterum, and can Obliterum be used to upgrade crafted relics?
So yes and no. Pretty much everything that's crafted can be put into the Obliterum Forge to make Obliterum. That's a lot of things, even like your flasks and enchants and on vellums and things like that can be made into Obliterum. Pretty much anything that you're using a good number of reagents to craft, you can obliterate. Okay. As far as using Obliterum to upgrade them, no. They are Obliterum upgrades armor, and relics kind of fit in a place somewhere between weapons and gems. They kind of simulate the weapon drops that you got in the past, but they actually operate as gems, and so no, their item level can't be increased with Obliterum. But we did make a change which isn't out on the beta yet to drastically increase the level of the eye level of the relics that you can create. They were 750.
Cool.
Now they're 805.
Oh wow.
And the number's still tuning, of course, but
but
yes, so they should be much more desirable
awesome.
for people at endgame.
Awesome. Next question from Elvine, who asked, in beta currently when mining at low levels, there are no petals for herbs nor nuggets for laystone or fell slate. Will these be returning in Legion?
No, we didn't make them this time. We do have one. It kind of took up a little bit of extra bag space, particularly for herbalists who have 6 or 7 different herbs that they can gather. To use 7 bag slots is already a pretty big ask. 14 for someone who's leveling is significantly bigger. And in addition, we do have a built-in ramp, something we actually haven't talked about today, which is in Legion we have skill ranks for certain skills you have as a crafter or gatherer. So in the case of gathering, if you are an herbalist, let's say, you have a skill actually in your skill book that says how good you are at harvesting Aethrol, which is one of the herbs which grows in Legion. When you start out, you don't have any stars or any ranks in that, and then after you gather a few, you get an item which sends you on a quest line, which you earn 1 rank in gathering Aethrol, and then you become more effective at gathering that particular flower, and so on for 2 and 3. So we already have that kind of ramp up just built in at the expansion level. Everybody's experiencing it, not just the people who are starting at skill level 1, but everybody who comes to Legion has that, like, okay, I'm not very good at picking this flower yet, up till I've been picking this flower for a long time, and I get a lot more resources out of it, including maybe potentially Blood of Sargeras.
Oh,
Yes.
nice. Next question then comes from Kalnea. I almost certainly pronounced that wrong. Question is, crafted gear is often used to fill a gap in gear obtained by other means. Why introduce more randomness, i.e. item level, when the randomized stats, which can't be rerolled this time, are already so frustrating to players?
So there's a couple things there. First of all, randomness in item level, we've taken a look at that, and that will be dialed back significantly, at least for level up gear. So we had experimented with a couple things. So item level will now be fixed for crafted gear with a couple of pieces where you can you might get a +10 boost to it. It got upgraded from rare to epic or something like that. As far as randomized stats, yes, and we kept those too. And the reason why we didn't do the re-rolling item this time is because we expect people to be crafting more gear this time. There's actually more of a reason to make more gear because you can put it in the Obliterum Forge and obliterate it. And so making an 815 item is good on its own. Making enough gear to bring that 815 item up to 850 requires a couple dozen pieces to be made. And then your randomness is mitigated by the fact that, okay, I really want to have a high amount of haste on my gear. Well, I made 20 pieces of gear, so I just picked the one with the most haste. There will probably be something there. That's why we didn't end up doing the reroll items this time around.
Yeah, so the Obliterum Forge kind of fills a similar... it kind of solves the same problem just from a different angle, whereas like in Warlords, you craft an item and then you... Like, say you craft a ring, and then you just get a whole bunch of the reroll items so that you just keep re-rolling it until eventually you get the stat distribution on it that you want. In Legion, you craft a bunch of that ring until... I'm just using a ring as an example, but you craft a bunch of that until you get the stat distribution that you want, and then you spend your Obliterum on it so that it gets the item level out of it.
Correct. Yeah, you use those other rings that you didn't want to make Obliterum and then apply it there. So that's the idea anyways. Please keep giving feedback on if that feels good for you, because like we said, this is... solving the same problem from a different angle. Does it feel better? Does it feel way worse? Let us know. We still have tuning knobs we can play with.
Cool. Next question comes from Penny Rush, who asked, "Are there going to be weapon enchants in Legion? If not, why do Death Knights keep rune forging?" So in terms of Death Knights keeping rune forging, I think it's important to recognize that that's sort of a class mechanic.
Right.
So it's not really intended as an analog to weapon enchants, even though they're applied similarly. It's more of this is a cool thing that Death Knights get because Death Knights needed a cool thing to have. Basically.
Yeah. Everybody's got their all the classes have their special thing. So outside of that, no, we don't have weapon enchants in Legion. And the reason why is because the weapon you're going to be using pretty much all of Legion is your artifact weapon. And that kind of comes baked in with 34 weapon enchant like features into it. So,
that's true, yeah.
So one weapon enchant was less exciting than it could be in other patches. So what we did was we brought the exciting proc based enchants that you're used to seeing on weapons and put those over to the neck enchants. I've always thought that necklaces could be way cooler than they are, and one of the ways we're doing that is by giving them the really exciting neck enchants.
That's cool.
So the
kind of spreads it out a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and the other reason that you might want weapon enchants in any patch of World of Warcraft is for the look, but with transmog system you can actually transmog weapon enchants onto your weapons. So I think our bases are covered there without actually having new effects on them.
Cool. Okay, next question. I cannot pronounce this person's name. I don't read Cyrillic very well.
It's Bezrogaya.
Bezrogaya. All right. Thank you. That's random skill you don't necessarily expect. He asked, any plans to make a united bank of reagents for all characters on a server? Sending reagents many times between alts is not fun.
I agree with you 100%. I think that would be awesome. And there's no real reason why we can't do that. There's no set in stone plans to do that. But I think that, at some point in the future, I wouldn't be surprised if that did become a thing. Just because, yes, you're right. Like the mail system serves a great function, and it is functional in this case. But there might be a better way, similar to the D3 shared stash, where you can just put things in box and log into other character, take thing out of box, and you just have it.
At least for the reagents that aren't bind on pickup, like Blood of Sargeras, I would assume.
Yes, correct.
Cool. Next question comes from Maurice, who asked, "Fishing. Why isn't the Why isn't the artifact part of the start? Seems better to have a low power version you increase while you skill up. Could still limit it to 700 plus."
Okay, so first of all, Maurice, who told you about the fishing artifact? Because that may or may not even exist. In all honesty, yes, there may be and actually is a fishing artifact. And we made the deliberate decision to kind of obfuscate where it is and how you get it and whether or not it even exists or is possible to get, just because it was, there's something interesting there about having things in the game which are hidden. That being said, I do want to save a lot of people pain. Don't believe everything you data mine. There is no obligation to perform the wish remover achievement to be able to get the artifact. That's the one where you fish out all the coins from the Dandelion Fountain. That achievement is just for fun. But yeah, the fishing artifact is meant to be something that's for people who are really into fishing. So you're going to have to do some fishing to hunt it down and be able to get it. It does kind of serve as a trophy in that respect. And also we want to make sure that, especially, in an expansion where, you're getting these really cool artifact weapons like the Scythe of Elune and Doomhammer and things like that, we aren't kind of diluting the fantasy of that. And also you get a fishing pole. That's a little bit later on in the game for people who are really interested in artifact-ly epic levels of fishing.
Nice. And yeah, it's cool to have, nowadays, as World of Warcraft, there's fan sites like Wowhead, which are great because they've got guides for all sorts of stuff on them. It's cool to have things that maybe we don't know everything about how to get this
right
before the expansion even launches.
Yeah.
So,
and sites like that will eventually data mine it or just by playtesting figure it out.
Yeah.
And then, that's the community at work, you guys figuring it out with each other.
Cool. Question here from Xylaros, I think. Who asked, are there any plans to make archaeology less tedious, specifically finding rare solves from older content?
So for archaeology, I'll talk about Legion archaeology first a little bit and then answer your specific question after. Legion level archaeology works a little bit different than it has in the past, but the core gameplay is still mostly there. So you are still surveying. You're going to places in the world where you see an outline on your map of there's probably a cool but cool archaeology item buried somewhere here, and you use your surveying equipment to get closer to it. The one kind of functional change, or at least system change we made, is you get feedback when you're actually standing on top of the item you would dig up now. So the gameplay changes from sometimes you had that irritating moment of, okay, I use my archaeology surveying equipment and I get that little green light, which means I'm close. So I run 5 steps forward and I use the archaeology equipment again, and it's still green because I didn't run quite far enough, or I ran too far and it's pointing the other direction.
Yeah.
Now, once you get that green light, you should probably just go explore with your feet, be a little bit, go walk
That's
around
cool.
until you find okay, it's here. And then when you dig, you're going to dig.
Nice.
So I think that makes a big difference systems wise. For the bigger picture, we have a lot fewer random projects in Legion than we have in the past. There are 5 per race. There's 3 races: the High Mountain Tauren, the Highborn, and demonic types of artifacts. And if you're just looking to get all the possible solves for achievements or all the pristine solves, just kind of combinatorically, it will take you much less time than in the past where we had something like 17 per race.
Right.
Hunting down the pristine solve of that last 17th one was often very painful. So that particular side should be a little less tedious. In addition, for rare solves in Legion, they don't come from those randomly selected ones. It's actually more of a ongoing story which goes on. So every 2 weeks, you will see a quest appear from your archaeology trainer starting at level 110. In Dalaran, and she'll say, hey, a famous archaeologist, Bran Bronzebeard, or the people at the reliquary, or other archaeologists, they think they found something, and it's over there in Suramar. So go over in Suramar and see if you can find it out. And then there's a quest line which should be very doable and over that 2 week period. And as a reward from that, you get those what would in the past have been rare solves. So things like a piece of gear or an heirloom or a pet or a mount or a really cool toy or just something that sells for 5,000 gold. So some really that's how it's solved for the current expansion. Now, your specific question, rare solves on older content, we're not smoothing that out right now. Not to say we wouldn't. I think, like I said, that 17th pristine is a little bit just when you're dealing with randomness, that's not the funnest kind of randomness to deal
Right.
with. But that being said, so you know both sides of the argument, there is something to be said for the people who have that really rare solve. They're the ones who either spent a lot of time or got exceedingly lucky and got that sandstone drake. So we need to make sure we don't ruin it for them. They're a cool moment. But it's something we talk about and we'll continue to talk about.
Yeah,
And
some
I
of
think
those
it's a good suggestion.
Some of those older rare solves, if all of a sudden it's changed and now everybody can just get them, they become less cool kind of by comparison. So it's important to balance that out.
Right.
Cool. Next question. Another one here from Elvine, who asked, gem chips are only used in cooking one recipe in Legion. Will they have a use within jewel crafting since they are obtained from prospecting ore?
So you're correct in your assessment that they are actually only used in one recipe, and that's really just for flavor because it's this high-end Suramar. You make like a jewel encrusted egg or something, and you put little gem chips outside of it. And it's the type of thing that a very fancy elf would eat or like to eat. Outside of that, they're meant to be just kind of vendor trash. Outside of, they actually do give you some informational advantage as a jewel crafter. So when you're prospecting, you might notice when you're looking in your prospecting window that the color of your chips that you're getting change. When they go to your bag, they're all just kind of colorless, bland chips. But when you're prospecting them, you might see red chips or orange chips or green chips. And that gives you information that the next gem that you prospect is going to be that color gem. So it might be orange gem or yellow gem or something like that, which lets you, if you're targeting a particular gem, maybe the way that things are working out, the green rare gem, Pandemonite, is really valuable. You really want it to make some gear or you want to sell it on the auction house. You prospect the cheap stuff until you get those green gem chips, and you're like, okay, now I'm going to start prospecting the more valuable stuff, the demon, the Fellslate, or even the Infernal Brimstone, so that you have a better chance of getting that really awesome gem or even more really awesome gems.
Cool. So they do kind of have a use within jewel crafting, just not as a crafting reagent, more as just an indication of what that next gem is going to be.
Right. And like we said, like we want to bring in fantasy of other professions. There's a fantasy of jewel crafters where, like, if you're an actual lapidary or jewel crafter, you do end up having gem chips that are unusable that you can, you just kind of have to get rid of or sell. And so that's what those are.
Cool. Next question comes from Vixelink, I think is how that's what I'm going to go with for this one.
Sure.
They asked, will cloth drops from humanoids be back in Legion? As a tailorer with no barn, it felt very tedious to obtain in Warlords of Draenor.
Yes. Yeah. Humanoids drop cloth. They do on the beta right now.
Okay.
There may be number tuning, but yes, you do get cloth from killing humanoids and humanoid-esque demons. So the demons that kind of walk around and look kind of like people, they have cloth drops too. And as a tailor, if you are a tailor, and it looks like you are, that you will see more cloth drops. There's no indication, like may have done in the past with like Northrend scavenging, of like you do just a passive ability in your book that says you're a tailor, so you get more, or you can train that. Like you just kind of passively do. So as a tailor, you should be able to obtain enough cloth by targeting areas, world quests, just grinding areas that have more humanoids in them.
Awesome. Let's see. Next question comes from Maurice again, who asked, why are there no bigger bags being added with tailoring this expansion?
Yes, that's also correct. There is no bigger bag size increase this expansion. It's just a deliberate choice to just kind of see how else we can reward tailors. So we'll see how it plays out. But the bag that you do make as a tailor is 24 slots, which is by no means the biggest bag you can make in the game. There are actually older ones, even in like mists, that you can make. But it is fairly cheap to make. So this is a catch-up bag. This is for your bank or for your alts or for your alts banks, of the people who you haven't completely tricked out with bags, that you can give them bags now without too much cost to your main character. So that's kind of the intent of the bag we added. There will be some players who already have all their alts completely tricked out with all the best bags, and then there won't be a bigger bag for you. Hopefully, with the addition of Transmog, you won't have as much need for bag space. But also in the future, that doesn't mean we're never ever going to add a bigger bag. It's just like right at this point, we added something different.
Cool. Moving on. Next question comes from Adreaver, who asked, why are skinners left at a disadvantage regarding personal nodes and multi-tap enemies, while miners and herbalists gain full benefit from these new enhancements?
Right. So for those of you who don't know, we have a new system in Legion, which allows you to multiple people can gather the same herb node or can gather from the same mining node. What happens, behind the scenes is the first person picks a flower and then it disappears for them, but other people will still see it on their mini map and in the game for a couple seconds afterwards, and they can pick it. So if you want to go out picking herbs or mining nodes with your friend or your spouse or a group of 5 people, you can all do that and you won't be competing. Or if you just see someone druid swoop in and steal it in front of you, you still have a chance to get it. Skinning currently doesn't obey that or doesn't follow that paradigm because it's implemented in a different way. And I kind of have 2 thoughts on this. One is that skinning has always been a little bit different. It's the only gathering profession where you can make your own nodes. You just go to an area with a bunch of boars and you kill the boars, and then you loot your own. So you have an advantage, or at least a functional difference in the way your gathering profession works than others. There's also that maybe someone else went and killed all those boars and I didn't have to do anything, and there's like 16 nodes. Well, probably not that many, but six corpses there that I can skin before they disappear. So they kind of have that difference. But in addition, I think you're right that there probably are ways that we can make it better. It's not something we've changed in 7.0, but it's something we've talked about, and you may see in a patch or at some point in the future that skinners will be able to play nicer with one another, as opposed to the way it is right now, which is only one player gets one skin per creature on the ground.
Yeah, and I can see some challenges with trying to sort out how to even make skinning multi-tap effectively, because like you could run into a situation where someone goes and kills a whole bunch of boars, but because other people might come along and skin it, now there's just this giant sea of dead bodies of boars laying around everywhere because maybe someone else is going to show up and want to skin this sort of thing.
Yes.
So yeah, I can definitely see why it would be a difficult thing to just say, yeah, I'll just make it multi-tap, no problem.
Right. Yeah. So they're not unsolvable problems. It's just
Sure.
where we didn't quite get into Legion, but we're still looking at it. Thank you for the question.
Cool. Next question comes from Galatea CYC. I'm just going to go with how you were pronouncing that earlier. Galatea CYC, who asked, are there any plans for more experienced crafters to craft better stuff than novice crafters, such as a higher chance at Warforged, ability to choose secondary stats, etc., instead of just creating more stuff?
So for background, people who aren't playing, yes, I talked about the skill levels, or the stars, sometimes we call them, of as you get better at, say, crafting a leather hat, you might be able to craft it without as much reagents, or as a blacksmith, you might not have to use the special anvil on the top of High Mountain anymore. You can craft it anywhere, any anvil you like. So the gains that we have given out from your ranks are really just efficiency gains. And to answer your question, no, there's no plans right now. It's something we talked about a lot, and there may be ways to do it in the future, like a higher chance at Warforged, I think is actually a really good idea, because it doesn't increase the top end for a rank 3 crafter versus a rank 1 or 2 crafter. And that's really where the concern comes from, is that we don't want it to be that when you're rank 1 or rank 2 crafting something, everything you make is suboptimal. It's garbage, and it's not worth buying or selling or even doing anything with.
Especially when it also costs more materials than somebody who's already got high ranks in that. Skill.
Exactly. So I potentially at some point in the future, I think that we would most likely stick with this paradigm for 7.0 and the rest of this expansion. But even then, who knows? We do, like I said earlier, there are plans to add more recipes and more patterns, and so you might see that one where you can, as you get better, you get better at putting better stats on items or something like that.
Cool. Question here from Karate Chops, who asked, is jewel crafting going to be relevant again in Legion? And how many sockets on average can we expect on items? So jewel crafting, I thought actually I was playing a jewel crafter in Warlords, and I felt like jewel crafting was fairly effective still in Warlords. I certainly sold a lot of gems.
Right.
But how do you feel about how relevant it was? Is it going to be relevant again in Legion? Our data showed that like gems were being sold. So I get where you're coming from, because I didn't play my jewel crafter this last expansion, and I saw that there were fewer items that had gem slots on them. And it felt like, oh man, jewel crafters must be having a hard time. But no, gems did move. So that being said, you can expect as many sockets as you saw
in Draenor, and maybe a little bit more. And we'll try and make sure that we do have gems on certain kind of high visibility deterministic places, gem slots. For example, crafters, crafted rings and crafted necks all have guaranteed gem slots on them. So if you are a jewel crafter and you're selling armor like necks and rings, you will also be making your own market for selling gems.
Cool.
Yeah.
Next question comes from Kriana, who asked, this has been a very popular suggestion over the years. Yes. Have you considered changing gathering professions to secondary?
Yes. So we consider a lot of things. And I think we have this discussion almost every expansion of like, do we want to make any super high level changes to how professions work? And we haven't pulled the switch yet, which isn't to say that we wouldn't in the future. We didn't this patch or this expansion because we already made a lot of changes. The big focus this time was one of the first questions I think you asked, which is the fantasy changes. That we're going to take crafting and we're going to push it really far into the quests and kind of content space as opposed to more of a system space that it's been in the past. But that being said, like potentially the downside there is it takes away from the power, or at least the fantasy, of miners and herbalists. I mean, that's not all that different from some of the changes we made in the garrison, or the features we released with the garrison, where you had your mine and your herb garden, and everybody could pretty much gather herbs or ore, and we had mixed response on that. So there's pros and cons to either side. I think it's something we will still consider looking at in the future.
Yeah, I definitely remember, like, I think there's something to be said for having to make that choice and that distinction on an individual character. Because thinking back to Mists of Pandaria, I had my alt druid who was an herbalist and a miner, so I would just fly him around Pandaria, picking up herbs, picking up ore as much as I could, and it was like, that gave me a really strong, solid reason to play that character. Right. Because most of my main characters were double crafters. Yeah. And it also, I think, is interesting when you actually make that choice to be a double crafter, especially in an environment where you don't get a raw benefit from the crafting professions in terms of character output. Yep. It's interesting to sort of say, okay, I'm going to be the person who buys stuff off the auction house, turns that into something more valuable, sells it back again on the auction house. I think there's something to be said for that sort of interaction being there. So. Yeah, I totally agree. It's a good point. Cool. Question here from Verada, who asked, with future patches in Legion, will there be profession-specific quest lines and new patterns added? Absolutely. Yes, we want to add more cool stuff. We already have kind of some online. We know, for example, scribes, people who have their profession as inscription, make Vantis runes, which is the new consumable. If you're not aware, it's a consumable which you can use to call out a particular raid boss and say, like, you, Xavius, my guild having trouble getting past you, or it's just you're the fight which takes the longest. So I'm going to use a Vantis rune on my character, and that's the one boss that I'm going to be much more effective against this week. We're going to have more raid bosses in the future. So there's an announcement. There will be more raid bosses than the ones we're shipping with 7.0. And there will be more Vantis runes, things like that. So there will be functional updates, but there will also be cool opportunities as there are new dungeons and world content and raids that kind of beg out for the... maybe we should add a cool mount here, or maybe we should add a cool profession quest line here, which really makes sense. So yes. Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Next question. We are starting to run short on time here, so hopefully we can get another couple of questions in. Sure. Question from Scaramane, who asked, are there any plans to introduce new professions in the near future, or is the focus on solidifying the existing professions? Maybe. There's no plans right now. But it's something, it's in those same meetings we kind of talk about, do we want to add new ones? Do we want to kind of change the way that the professions work? Do we want to combine? Do we want to separate one profession into two? And so maybe, I think if there's a good opportunity to do so, we'll look at it. What would you be interested in seeing? Send feedback or pitches for cool professions. I think that there's still room to do interesting things in the professions part of our game. Logging, I think, touched on a little bit of it in Draenor, where it was kind of a semi-gathering profession, which you could spec into in the form of a building, and it kind of lived in that expansion. So those are things that we're interested in, and love to hear more feedback on ideas. Cool. All right, we will do one more question. This one comes from Wraith on Twitter, who asked, with the removal of the glyph system, what do you see as the function for inscription in Legion? So just to clarify, obviously the glyph system isn't gone. It's just changed fairly dramatically.
Yeah, so glyphs still exist. There are no glyphs that give you player power anymore. They were called major glyphs and minor glyphs. Now the glyphs that exist were the ones formerly known as minor glyphs. And they work differently than they had in the past. So they're applied as consumables as opposed to just a learnable skill that your character had. So in Draenor and earlier, you would buy a glyph, and then you would click it, and then you would know it forever, and you could always kind of choose to switch to that glyph if you wanted. Now, if you want to switch back and forth between my memory of glyphs isn't great, but one which turns your fireball blue or one that turns your fireball purple, you would need to have a couple of each if you want to switch back and forth. I want it to be blue today. Now I want it to switch purple. I need to use another one. So as a scribe, you will be selling more of them in theory, but in addition, there's other things they can make. There are the Vantis runes I mentioned earlier. Those are made by scribes and made only by scribes. There's the tomes and codexes of the Tranquil Mind, which are used to respec your talents out in the field. So which I think will be a very popular commodity and consumable. So I think that scribes are going to do well, and they're going to be making a lot of stuff. And there's also we really wanted to dig into the fantasy of scribes, so they can make the steamy romance novel kit as well. Which is, I think, if any profession did that, would be scribes, right?
Yeah, definitely. All right, so that's about all the time we have for today. Is there anything else that you really wanted to get to that we weren't able to cover here?
No. Thank you for all the questions. I think keep giving us feedback. We're gonna keep working and kind of tuning up all the graphics and polishing all the numbers, and hopefully you enjoy playing Legion when it comes out August 30th.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being here. Next week, we are going to be back here at the same time, same place. We will be doing a PvP Q&A with Brian Halinka. That's going to be our next Q&A. So we will get the blogs and the forum posts up to gather those questions. Feel free to send them in on Twitter as well using hashtag LegionQA. Again, that's going to be anything PvP related with Brian Halinka. So yeah, thanks again for being here, Paul.
All right.
Thanks everybody for tuning in.
All right.
We will see you guys next time.
Bye.